I'm Roger+Kull. Welcome to my Cave Creek, Arizona studio. I have a unique art medium. It's leather. Most people think of it as craft. Mine is called pictorial leather sculpture. I'm going to be showing some of the techniques that I use, some of the materials that I use, and I hope you find this interesting and fun. I work on 1/4-inch thick cowhide. It's about the thickness of shoe sole leather. I do use the finest leather in the world, English leather, and some of my hides come from New Zealand, where the tanning process is considered to be superior to most anything out there. You never get in trouble using good materials. When I work, I do no hammering. The technique is something that's traditional. It takes sometimes about 100 tools to complete a project, but I don't do that. My work is done with 2 tools. A standard saddle maker's swivel knife and a clay modeler's spoon. This is simply a little metal rod with a little curved point on one end and a little spoon on the other. That's all it is. Keep in mind, I'm doing something that is close to sculpting. I'm a freehand artist. I like to do my own design work. Traditionally, leather is mostly done with tracing patterns, but that ties you down to work that someone else has already done. Watch while I just simply lay out what I do. I'm going to do a Southwestern design. It's going to be a piece of primitive pottery laying in the sand. Now keep in mind that on leather, any mark that you put on the leather is going to show. It's going to be there. So erasing is not an option. Opening of the pot, the curvature of the pot. The pot is broken. You can see the piece missing here. So we're going to put some missing pieces here on the ground. And now we're going to create a little cave scene. A lot of the primitives lived in caves. So we're going to have a little cave opening. And we're going to do a mountain in the background here. Here then you have the basic layout for a pot. What's missing? Design work. We're going to put a design on the pot. So we're going to run some of the curved lines down. The primitives painted with chewed yucca. It made a little fuzzy brush that they could use. And they were very good at boiling down plant juices that would carbonize in the firing and would produce the colors that they needed on the pottery. Mostly black, some red due to the influence of colored clays. As you can see here, to make the pot look round, I have hooked the lines. This gives curvature to your lines. It gives it dimension because the leather allows itself to have dimension in it. Design work, the primitives had a lot of designs that meant certain things. Some were strictly decorative. A lot of that has been lost to time. We don't really know sometimes what they were getting at, but the design work remains, and that's part of the history of the Southwest. So, in favor of the sake of art, we do some traditional geometrics. Primitives were big on geometrics. They felt that it represented the houses they had, the dwellings, the mesas. A lot of tradition involved. These are broken pieces, so we're going to put a few little geometric lines on those. Now the swivel knife. The only thing unique about this knife is that it has a ceramic blade that doesn't need sharpened very much. They used to say they were lifetime, but I've worn about 20 of them out. But I love the tool. It swivels. Clever name since it's a swivel knife. It swivels. Downward pressure with your finger, then you control it. It's designed to cut around curves. I'm cutting, I cannot erase. Keep that in mind. this little notch here that I'm making, right here, is not a mistake. You will see that come into play later. That's actually a little marker for me to remember the positioning of where a crack in the pot is going to be. These are broken pots. Very little of the pottery that was found in the Southwest, unless a place was abandoned suddenly, really had pottery that was intact. Most of it was broken. There's another one of those little notches right here. Everything I do has a reason. To continue to cut the pot here is fine. I've done something to speed the process up. I have something similar here that's almost through with the cuts. A few here. And remember that little notch I had here and here? This is where the crack goes. Notice how randomly that is cut, little jaggy edge. Now you have the cracks, the piece missing, the pottery shards laying on the ground. You have your mountain background, your cliff sweep. All of those elements are here. At this point, I take a razor knife. I can cut these little pieces out. Keep in mind, my work is dimensional when it's finished. We are going to remove a piece of leather. It's not going to be ruined, it's just going to be a little hole through the leather. And you'll see how that comes into play. Same here on the opening. The only caution here is to not cut yourself and bleed on the leather. This is going to be the opening of the pot. A little back cutting here. And you will see the reason why this is done this way is it creates a wonderful elliptical opening on the opening of the pot, which is a true shape. And you will see all the reasons. Now this leather is damp and it will take an impression. So I'm going to smooth, push lines down, move things around. This pot's sitting on the ground. I want it to look like it's sitting down into the sand. These flowing lines do that for me. I'm pushing down quite firmly with this tool. I'm going to round some little edges and soften the edges. Create some more flowing lines. And when you look at this, with just those little touches, you are going to see that that sets that down into the sand. Now comes the sculpting part. I'm working on the edge. Hammering makes this look very hard-edged. You end up with very much of a craft project. That is not what you want. You want to smooth, move the leather a little bit, always soften those edges. And this is the technique, truly a hand technique, that makes the work unique. If you think I'm fast at this, you're right. 80,000 hours of practice. One little trick here that I do is I get on the back side of these lines and I create a little elevation in the leather. This is done typically throughout this piece. Notice these little openings here in the horizon. There's a reason for those too, just as there was a reason for these little notches. We're going to take this up a step and go to the next stage, where a piece like this is already formed in. As you can see, all the lines, textures, the pottery. A lot of people ask me how I get dimension in my work. They think that I use molds, that I set this thing down and put it in a press of some sort. It's not true at all. I'm going to just cut in those cliff lines. Like I say, I am a freehand artist, so that's what I do. Remember those little openings that I showed you here? If you want grass in the background, that lets you put in just a little bit of scenery in the background. With that mountain in the background that you've seen on the other pieces, this just sets it back, gives it a stage, so to speak. You can even, since this is a cliff wall, you could even put petroglyphs, the rock art of the primitives in here. This is a sun figure. They were agricultural people. They were hunter-gatherers before that. They did a lot of animals. I'm doing the little mountain sheep here. All of those things. Now, cliff sweep, this is going to be pressed, pushed and moved, and right over the top of these, we're going to have some of those wonderful sweeping cliff lines that are befitting the beautiful stone cliffs and monuments up in the Four Corners region. We're going to do the stretching technique here, just to show you how basic handwork is and how easy something can be without overthinking it. Leather is pliable when it's damp. Moisture content is critical. As you work on leather, you get the feel of it. The back of the spoon is all you need to stretch this. I'm going to create some ripples in the sand. Notice what I'm doing here. Pressing and dragging that on the underside, creating elevation. When I get this done, this really sets the pot down into the sand. But what about the pot? Holding with one hand to create resistance, I'm going under and I'm working up into the palm of my hand. I'm dragging that spoon with pretty fair pressure up, around the edges, and I am pulling that leather up. I am making this leather stretch and draw and pull up into the shape that I want it. When leather is stretched in this manner, if it's done just right and the moisture content is correct, it will stretch and stay. That's critical to the work I do. You want this thing to hold form. If the leather's too damp, you can stretch it okay, but when you lay it out to dry, it's going to go back. You want this to stretch and stay. Here you have the elliptical opening. You have the wonderful shape. The cliff sweeps will be done too. But now you can start to see really how the dimension works. And it's all two hand tools. Once this dries, probably 24 hours minimum, you want all of the moisture out of this. Once the moisture is out of it, this will hold shape. To show you what I mean, here is a piece that has been stretched. You can see it's the same leather, but look, hasn't changed a bit. And it will not change unless water is reintroduced into it. Dry as this is now, it is now ready for the colors. I'm a little protective. They always say that some leather workers have leather secrets. I have some. The colors that I use are rather specialized. I use dyes rather than paints. Paints lay on the surface. Eventually leather will breathe and the paints will crack. You do not want that. Art pieces are meant to be handed down. Artists look at their work as a legacy. They want to be remembered after they're gone. They want people to collect their work, hand it down to their children and to their grandchildren. This is the beauty of being in a business of this nature, is you have the opportunity to make things that endure. All great civilizations are remembered through their art and architecture. Think about it. We wouldn't know anything about the Egyptians if it weren't for the wonderful, wonderful pyramids, the architecture, all of the hieroglyphics, all of the things that were their art forms. That's the only reason we know them. Artists actually think about this sometimes. I don't know why, but they do. Next step is the dye process. You don't need much. Again, my dyes are a little bit specialized, but that's just the way it is. If someone thinks they recognize the bottles that I use, trust me, it is simply what I mix my colors and put them in. I have favorite brushes. But keep in mind, this is pigmentation that will actually penetrate into the leather. It's painted on with a brush. The nice thing about it is that when it dries, it actually becomes part of the leather. You will actually see no brush lines once this dries and goes into the leather. It's pretty easy to do unless you're working on something that's critical in form. Say a portrait piece where you're doing eyelashes, you're doing eyebrows, things like this, where you have to be very critical with what you're doing. But that's something that you get used to as an artist when you work. It's part of the trade. Rather than bore you with painting forever on this, I'm going to show you a piece with just the colors on it. I live in the Southwest. The Gamble quail is a very, very popular bird. I don't know why he's not our state bird, but we have the wily cactus wren, which I don't think most people know what he is. But this is definitely the most popular bird here. You can see the dimension on this. The dyes are on, all colored, but it's rather flat looking. It has no life, no punch to it. So something that adds dimension to it, along with the leather being dimensional, is an extra step. It's a step called leather dye. These are transparent dyes. This is an oil dye. There's a couple of ways you can put this on, but you can rub it on by hand with a piece of sheep's wool. Actually, almost dry it by rubbing it on a paper towel, and then gently swirl and rub it until you get the shadow and shading that you want. Look at the difference between these two pieces with just one step as to what it does and how it enhances what is done. Once this is done to this level, then the clear sealant goes on this. Leather needs to be protected because in this form, where it's raw leather, oil from your hands, ultraviolet light, all kinds of things will affect it. You need something that's very, very permanent. Again, we want these to be handed down. I use a sealant that is kind of a derivative of a boat finish. Keep in mind that the wood on boats is protected by spar varnish. It protects against the sun. It protects against natural sulfuric acid, which develops in the air between salt water and atmosphere. It's powerful stuff, but it keeps the wood on boats from rotting away in about 2 seasons. It's modified some for the leather. It's a little pricey, but it does a great job. And I have a piece here, a little different. This is a Model A Ford sedan sitting in front of a cantina. You'll notice the Coca-Cola sign. This is Marietta's. It's a nice little piece of art. I don't like to do just a car sitting there. I want it to be an art form. You have a little broken wagon here with the wheel off. You have the plants and the walls. Notice how that stain, the oil dye, has planted that car down onto the ground. But there's a neat little step that goes on, I'm going to show you, which enhances every little knife cut that is put on this thing. Unless you make a mistake, then it will enhance something that you really don't want to be enhanced. But we try not to make mistakes. I'm going to show you this. This is going to look like I'm ruining my work. This is a common product, an antique finish. You can buy it at any leather store, a common brand. There's several types out there. I use a tan. It comes in a variety of colors, but tan is something that I like. It's not too dark, not too light. apply it with a paintbrush, you're going to think that I am ruining this. When people see this for the first time, they wonder what on earth I am doing. I'm going to do half of this piece to show you how this goes into every little niche, every little mark on here. You have about 10 or 15 seconds to get this off of here. If you don't, it will irreversibly darken your leather. What this has done is brought out the detail and all of the hood vents, the radiator vents, all the little lines around the headlight, the seats, the steering wheel. Notice how dark this is around here as compared to over here. It actually outlines things for you. You want your cuts to be accurate, but you want to be able to enhance them and really show off what you do. Once this piece gets a water bath, it's going to be ready for framing. The finished work has life to it. This is a piece with the turquoise inlay on it. The finishes on it, you can see the wonderful luster and shine that the colors. Everything you do enhances it when you punch it up with the antiquing and, of course, the good finish. This piece is oil resistant, acid resistant, and ultraviolet protected. People can touch this. This is not fragile. This is something that can take a few relatives and friends handling it and pushing on, pressing on it. It's not going to hurt it. When people take fine art home, they want it to last. They don't want it falling apart in one season. These stones are attached to that finish quite well. I use a product called acrylate. Trust me, the stones don't fall off. They're a tradition in the Indian community. The sky stone is something that the primitives thought protected them from lightning and thunder. They would wear it as a necklace form, feeling that that would do the trick. And so a few of them got struck by lightning. They had some validity to that. But it's called the sky stone, and it's beautiful. This particular variety is Sleeping Beauty turquoise, and it comes from up around the Superstition Mountain area, all Arizona. If you take this piece as it stands, unframed, it needs just one finishing touch to make it really, really look nice. And that is a picture frame. And you can see here then what the piece looks like set into the frame and ready to go home with someone to hang on their wall, enjoy with their family, and hopefully enhance their interest in art and their love of art for their entire lives. Thank you for joining me in my Cave Creek studio. I'm Roger+Kull. I hope you've had a lot of fun. I sure have.